Hi everyone, Candy Navarro, BPDI, when I started at Alliance, I was part of CCST as Director of School Counseling. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joy May Harris, and I started in the Alliance in 2005. So I think the only person in here would be Fabio. So I started in 2005. Previous founding principal of Alliance Skirball, previous principal at Alliance Virgil Roberts, and current executive director of both schools. And also now on the HBCU task force.
Figure this mic thing out. Hey everyone, good afternoon. Stephani, Tsai, Instructional Superintendent. I actually started in Alliance as a student teacher in 2007 at our first school, which is Gertz-Ressler High School, but started as number 1. And I went on to be a teacher and assistant principal at ESAT, now known as Lightman Levine, and I've been part of the home office for the last 4 years. Also was a principal at Gertz. I missed that part.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Abeni Carr-Johnson. I'm the principal at Kory Hunter. I've been here since 2021. You lose track of time after you've been with the Alliance for a while. And I've been a principal there for the last 4 years, but I've been a principal overall for the last 12 years.
Thanks, and let's go ahead and jump into our first question. And I think the slides. Are we okay? All right, cool. So the first question here, how have the diverse experiences of women shaped your leadership style and decision making, thinking across maybe race, culture, identity, and background? Whoever would like to start that, go ahead and kick it off.
Are you saying in the Alliance or just in general?
I would say in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there are 2 women who still drive my work right now. And one was my mother, who was an educator at Mount Vernon Junior High School here in Los Angeles, which is now Johnny Cochran Middle School. And the other person is Judy Ivy Burton, hands down. Amazing women, they pushed you without really pushing you. You just turned around and you realized, oh, I'm doing this, I'm applying for this, I'm taking this class, I'm in this program. And what they showed me was, just like the norms of say the thing, I always say the thing because they always said the thing. They didn't shrink in their greatness. And I wish everyone in this room who didn't know Judy could have met her. She was amazing, and met my mother also.
Go ahead and add on to that. Judy Burton honestly was the first woman that I really saw walk into a room and I was like, damn, that's some presence. And I was a 23-year-old student teacher. I didn't know if I was gonna have a long-term future in education. I didn't know if I would eventually be hired in Alliance. And I honestly didn't grow up with a lot of mentorship from females in leadership positions. And so I remember her walking into my classroom in her heels, her pearls, her St. John's suits. And I just remember being like, damn, that's our CEO. And she would spend time in our classrooms and she would give us feedback. She did not hold back. And I just remember being so blown away by her and seeing that example of her, and also knowing that at that time Alliance was such an experiment. We hadn't even graduated our first senior class yet, and she was so confident in her vision and so confident in leading us in what she was doing, which was this newer and bold thing. So just really appreciate her fearlessness. Secondly, I would say Melissa Chu, and I actually just got off of a call where we were being coached by her. Many of you know her. She is also an Alliance legend. And very different from Judy Burton, and I think I have felt equally inspired by and moved by both of them. Melissa Chu is just fierce in her own right. She's a petite Asian woman. She is not what folks saw as the archetype of a principal, especially when she came in as a principal in Alliance. I actually had the opportunity to know her briefly when she was a teacher, and then in AP, also got to see her step into motherhood. And so very many pieces of her journey were just one step ahead of mine, and I got to watch that and see how that unfolded. And she's just always been a safe space for me to go to for both personal advice, but also to directly coach me and say the thing to me and give me feedback on my practice. So I've always really looked up to her.
I would say my mother definitely was the reason why I got into education. She was a teacher, and I think I devastated her when I was 13 because I was like, I want to be a teacher. And she was like, please do not go down that road. And I did, but I think something that reminds me all the time of why I'm in this role is the way that I show up. I come into a building and I know identity does matter. I know that I show up as a Black woman. And so oftentimes I think about the experiences of my brothers or my siblings and their friends who were quite often expelled or kicked out of schools. And so when I got into education, or when I went to school to go into education, I wanted to go into leadership to really dismantle a lot of the systems that existed. And this is like before we started talking about them more commonly, but I think once you become a leader, you realize that there are limitations. And so some of these ideals that you had are like, oh, maybe I can't change the system, right? And so what I've learned is really getting with like-minded women and strong leaders is really important to me to protect Black and brown students and to make sure they have all the opportunities that they can. And so what I'm appreciative about Alliance is seeing so much diversity and being able to have conversations out loud that say like, hey, this is wrong, or how do we, dismantle this, or how do we better support students?
Yeah.
So for me, before I came to Alliance and even in my undergraduate and graduate experiences, I was in very white spaces. And so I was very difficult. I always felt like this need to like almost assimilate, kind of shy away from my identity. And I had a woman who was my mentor when I was an undergrad and then moved on to continue to be my mentor in the profession. And she said, your identity is something that is going to open so many doors for you. You need to embrace it. It needs to be a part of who you are. You cannot shy away from it, especially in these spaces. And it was really important and critical because the kids, I say girls because I worked at an all-girls school for many years. The girls of color came to see me as sort of an asset for them and like just a comfort. And it wasn't until like I realized that, and she would tell me like, you are letting people down if you don't embrace this. And I was like, I'm letting people down, oh my gosh. But I think it was just, she needed to tell me in so many different ways. And it's been something kind of like, Abeni, what you said, like it's really driven like this dismantling of just racism and just considering so many different things all of the time, that it really has motivated my life's work. It motivated even like my dissertation, which was around looking at an all-girls school, specifically looking at cultural school climate, right? And what a lot of people think like, oh, you were at an affluent school, so you've got brown and Black kids that are also affluent, like it's all great. And it wasn't, right? There was still a lot of the things that we see here at the Alliance, we were seeing them there, but folks are like, man, it's a level playing field, like they have different the same socioeconomic status. And no, I felt like the fire was even more rampant for me to like really speak up in those spaces. And so to have found my voice in that space has been like one of honestly my life's like achievements. Like if you were to ask me like, hey, what do you think is like your greatest thing, was that feeling like I actually belonged exactly like all the other white people around me. I will never forget her for pushing me to be able to realize that, because I can enter any space, and even if I fake it, like I'm not faking it way like over the top. And so I still deal with imposter syndrome, like don't take that away, but I can enter a space, especially a white space, and not be scared. And that to me is my biggest like life's achievement.
Thank you all so much. And I really appreciate just hearing the ways that these different experiences, these different learnings have shaped the approaches to leadership in so many different ways. from, you know, what it looks like to be a leader that leads out loud and a leader that leads in maybe a more subtle way, the ways that our experiences show up in that. Thank you. Our next, we'll also be leaning into other things that were brought up, like motherhood and, I had something at the top of my mind. But first, we'll talk a little bit about joy. Can we go to the next question? Specifically. So I'd love to hear about a moment of joy in your career or your leadership that you attribute to the influence of another woman. Whoever would like to start that off.
I can start because mine just happened more recently. When I first started teaching, I shared with my students that one day I wanted to become a doctor. And they were like, oh, you want to become a surgeon? And I was like, no, I want to go to school for many more years and I want to become a doctor of education. And people were like, my students were like, oh, you know, we'll call you Miss Doctor. And I was like, no, you would just call me doctor. And they were like, but why? Like, you know, why do you want to be called that? And so we just, you know, had a lot of conversations. I had a girls group at that time when I was a teacher in Compton. And so I had a group of like 5 students who would always say like, you know, Miss, why did you go to school? Why is that important? Wouldn't you rather get married? And don't you want kids? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I think we could do all those things. But right now I'm just prioritizing school. And I wasn't aware of like how that was such a foreign idea to some of my students. And I realized that like a lot of my students hadn't had somebody who went to college or, you know, even explain like you get your bachelor's and then your master's and then your doctorate. And a lot of my students were like, why would you want to go to school that long? But more recently, I had one of my first students that I ever taught. She just finished her master's and just applied for her doctorate. And, you know, she messaged me on Facebook. I don't know how she found me because I put a fake name, but she found me. And she was just like, I just want you to know, you know, I'd like if you come to my master's graduation and I'm getting my doctorate. And, you know, I think that sometimes as women, we don't really know the influence we're having. And so just like regular conversations, you know, and to know that that stuck with her all those years, even though I hadn't talked to her in many years, is something that like, okay, these conversations are important, even if they seem small to us. And so, you know, to know that my student from Compton is getting ready to get her doctorate, that's something I'm really proud of and brings me just a lot of joy.
There was an assistant principal at Audubon. It was junior high then when I was teaching. Oh my goodness. It's Audubon Magnet Middle School now. And her name was Barbara Rickett. And, you know, I started teaching as a sub. And I actually started at my mother's school. She was like, you know what? This entertainment thing is not going to work for you. I need you to at least, while you know, are out all night, being an intern, I used to work for Delicious Vinyl in RCA for a minute, but didn't really get paid a lot. I got paid in drinks and, you know, party entrances. And so, I mean, you know, those your early days when you come back from college. And she said, no, you're gonna do this, so go see this person. And so I started substituting at Mount Vernon and then was called over to Audubon. And they realized, wait a minute, we put her in the worst classroom in the school and we haven't heard a peep. And I said, and you won't, because they're in here learning. And so the assistant principal, Barbara Rickett, would bring me into her office and we'd talk. And then I found out that she went to Florida A&M University. Why did I find that out? Because I, of course, if some of you know me, went to Florida A&M University, and we just gelled from there. And she was so poised. She reminded me a lot of Judy. She was so poised and matter of fact and elegant. That's what I remember about teachers growing up. They were so elegant and well-dressed and well-spoken, and you just sat at their knee and learned everything. And she said, always, always be yourself, but say the thing. And that's what I did, you know, and she's passed on now. She retired and moved back to Tallahassee, and she's passed on, but she's on my shoulder all the time, you know, so I sort of move in spaces with her on my shoulder.
Hello. I would say for me, this is a moment of joy that came after a period of hardship. And I would say, honestly, like leading a school through a pandemic for a year and a half of distance learning was some of the hardest shit I've ever had to do. I also am married to an Alliance principal. At the time, he was an assistant principal at one of our schools. And so he was on his computer, coaching his people and running his team. I was on my computer trying to run a whole school. And we had 3 kids at home that lost their school because of the pandemic, so their preschool had closed down. And so I had a 4-year-old running around, basically running his own life, and learned how to get his own snacks, and got when he would pass my computer screen. Ryan knows Ryan was my IS at the time. And then I had 2 twin girls who were 5 who started kindergarten on Zoom. Had never been to a formal school experience. Literally their first, year and a half of their lives, they didn't meet any of their classmates in person. And that was their introduction to what education was going to be for them. And so to say that I felt stretched thin is an understatement. And I really had a couple people that just really held it down for me. I think one, having a supportive supervisor, an incredibly supportive and hands-on husband, having other women that I could connect with throughout to be like, damn, this is hard. The burden of being a woman, being a mom, being a leader, all of that, and then having to do that from your joggers, but your button-down shirt in front of a computer, right? And feeling like you couldn't leave, like there was no outlet, there was no, going to the gym, there was no getting my hair done, no nails, there was no me time, because I was in it all the time. And so, also honestly, my AP at the time, who is now the principal of Gertz Ressler, Gwen Browdy, I mean, she was my rock. She was my absolute partner in running that school from start to finish, late night Zooms, early morning calls, texts, let's realign. It was also really when we started the true launch of our DEI work at Gertz, and we were 2 white women doing this from behind a computer screen. And there was moments where we would look at each other like, are we the right people for this work? It doesn't matter who else is gonna do it, let's go. Hand in hand, let's just jump in. We're gonna have hard conversations with folks. We're gonna run a really high quality, as best as we could, program for our kids, and we're gonna do this thing. And I think also just navigating, as many folks did, right? Folks who were impacted by COVID, close family members and friends who were dying, and grief was a weird thing, is a weird thing, and was especially weird when you didn't have that closure of funerals and such. But at the end of it, I would say we were able to achieve a lot of our goals at the school. My kids, did all right. We survived as a family. And right at the end of that period, right as we were reopening for some in-person learning, I won Principal of the Year. And that was honestly one of my career highlights. Because I think in that moment, I just felt really seen. And it's you don't do it for the awards and the accolades and whatever, but damn, that felt good to be hey, we see you and we celebrate you. And I think it was a moment that really lifted me back up and gave me the confidence I needed to step back into in-person and be let's reset again and figure this thing out.
So I was gonna talk about an instance where I had a student that I thought hated me, then somehow found my mom, and then was yeah, she motivated me. I'm now studying to be a college counselor, but I can spare that story for next time. But what I wanted to talk about, what came to mind for me was honestly, she's sitting in the room right now, is Susie and myself. When I was on CCST, the passion that we both have over counseling, and we would call it sorry Susie if I'm outing you here, but we would call on CCST the falling C, right? And there was so much hey, the counseling one, we're we gotta get it up there, especially for middle school counseling. And we just would come up with ideas on how we could really incite things, programming for middle schools, and how we could bring in counselors at the middle school and make sure that programming was dedicated to them. How can we find funding for them to think about their work in social personal counseling as well as college counseling as early as like 6th grade. And sometimes when I felt discouraged, she was never discouraged. She was like, Candy, let's, we didn't get that funding, but it's okay. Let's do it another way. Let's come up with a curriculum. And having her be the manager of middle school counseling, like her and I could just like bounce off ideas, and she would come and she'd be like, okay, Candy, I think I got it. Here, what do you think about this? And it was just awesome to see. And it was awesome to like move on because there was curriculum, and to know that she was taking over the department, I knew that like middle school counseling wouldn't fall behind, and that falling C was not going to fall behind either. That there could be a lot of work that could be done comprehensively with school counselors at the Alliance.
Thank you so much. I think what I really appreciate and what really like resonated for me was hearing how, even though this is a question about joy, it also brought in how we find joy through conflict and through challenge, and how much we lean into other people for that in our community. And that kind of really brings us into our next question. Just given the social political climate where women are under increased scrutiny and attack, what or who do you lean into for support, for guidance, or for strength?
I have had the privilege of being part of a fellowship this year that is a national fellowship. I get to network with people all over the country in a variety of different roles, mostly in like district leadership roles, some executive directors. And as part of that program, I get to work with a couple of different coaches, but one of them specifically is someone who's trained in the Immunity to Change framework, for those of you who have read the ITC book. And she specifically meets with me, usually on a monthly basis. And she's somebody that I just feel like is real with me, can bring in the national context. She's a woman who's been in education leadership for many years and is now a CEO of her own organization. And so she's somebody that I have quickly come to know and love and really look up to, but can really talk me through in an unbiased way things that I'm navigating, whether it's things related to just being a woman in leadership, things related to balancing motherhood and the work that we do. And I think it's just such a gift. And so my encouragement to everybody in the room is like, if you don't have somebody that you feel like is a mentor or coach, find one. There are folks, and it is part of your professional development that you can seek out. So highly recommend.
I think I do what I always do whenever there's like craziness, lean into a mimosa and build community. Because I do feel like that is like the general answer to things. Not at work, Sundays, Saturdays. But I would say that building community has been really important. And so I know that I'm not the only one that's going through it. And I think sometimes we are in silos that we don't know, like, oh, these people are going through it as well. So I think whether it was like, I just lost my mother a year ago, so building community around other women who unfortunately are part of that club, or getting with other leaders and principals who are going through like the craziness of being a principal, or just saying like, man, did you see the news? Like, how are we gonna stay sane? And so, I do try to find time where, my grandparents taught us like, you can get everybody together and eat and you guys will get through it. And so I think that's what I do with my friends, with my families, with people that I see that are new as principals to Alliance. And I remember like, oh man, just learning all the Alliance like language was tough. So I know just being a principal is even harder, right? And so I do lead into a community and might add a mimosa or two on top of that. But I do think it is important that we realize that like we're not alone in going through things, because when you hear the news or just the things that are expected of us as mothers, you feel like you're all alone, and it'd be easy to fall susceptible to feeling like you're drowning. And so it's important for me to always build community.
This is another easy question, because as a member of Delta Sigma Theta, I'm sorry, I just don't really I understand the question, but I have that built-in community. My sisters, my sorors are there. They are some of the most accomplished, beautiful, brilliant women I've ever come across. And when we are going through this climate, we're in it together. We're in it together. It is Sisterhood Month, and we've been sisterhooding all month long to get us through all of the madness and the craziness. It's important to me that this sisterhood that I'm a part of be something that is also something that can help me, I can help them, and we'll get through all of this together.
I think for those of you in the room who know me well, you know that first and foremost I lean on God and my faith, and I know that I am not alone, never. And I think that that's what really helps me and motivates me to lean over to other folks. I have like this group of like 4 women who actually we don't hang out together, and I met them at different points of my life. In fact, I always think, how what would it be like if we were all always like together as a group? They're not connected at all, but they're women that I go to for very different things who really help me get through situations, or just that I can, I don't know, just like vent to, pray with, like scream with, go have coffee with. So I really recommend that if you are able to like get a squad of women that are just like powerful, and it doesn't have to be one woman that you go to for everything. They can be like different people that are motivating you through various challenges, or to have that 3rd or 4th mimosa as well. Sometimes you just need that person also. I can't wait to drink again. And so as I experience motherhood now too, that's been another one for me. A lot of you in the room know Evelyn. She's on mat leave, the IS. Oh my gosh, like texting her or sending each other Instagram videos at 1 and 4 in the morning, we're on the same schedule, has been an absolute lifesaver. And so that has been really, really great. But again, it's like those 4 women that I can just tap into all of the time who are really helping me get through. And I know we don't say this enough, and I don't mean to be preachy, but really leaning into my faith. And if you have that, or whatever you believe in, really leaning into that can get you through so many different challenges.
Thank you so much. All right, y'all. I just want to go ahead and start off by saying thank you again to all of our panelists for being able to share not just your experience, your wisdom, your learning. And to all of us, I hope that this is just the start of a conversation that we can continue to have. The work that we do is not just about our titles and the work, but it's also the impact that we have on one another, the joy that we share with one another, the community that was such a central part of our conversation today. So thank you all so much for being part of this community, and we'll take a 5-minute break.